Good evening, everybody. My name is David Fort. I'm with Kitsap County, and welcome to the North Sound Olympics Trail Feasibility Study tonight. We're online, so we have people listening online going through this participation. And we'd just like to thank you all for coming and all for being online as we go through. So today we'd like to have some opening comments from Commissioner Gilder.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. As I was driving here this evening, there's probably no better way to celebrate solstice than to be awash in sunlight today. Especially as we've been emerging out of the weeks that seems a really damp, cool, wet weather. We did a site visit on the Eglon DNR property last Friday, which was dry, but only on the fringes. It was still pretty cool. But thank you all for being here. Appreciate it so much. As I was thinking about it, this is one of those topics that had kind of followed me throughout my entire tenure with the county. I joined Kingston County in 2011, and it was really that fall we had the culmination of a lot of work from the Northern Kitsap Trails Association, which crafted really the first chapter in what would be our non-motorized plan for Kitsap County. And because it was actually ahead of schedule of our overall county planning, that a gentleman by the name of Dennis Ost was spearheading on behalf of the county. And so that all got incorporated into the big plan. And then, of course, as that non-motorized trails plan or facilities plan became part of our overall planning kind of construct moving forward. And when you think about sort of the uniqueness that we have in Kitsap County, and I've always looked at it, and I think there's a graphic maybe on the next page, which really kind of shows and illustrates Kitsap County in the middle of Central Puget Sound. And in many ways, we are a missing link this is the Sound to Olympics, but when you think about everything that's happening across the state on the other side, coming to the Sound, and then being able to get from there to the Olympic Peninsula, we have always been sort of that weakest link. And so I know that as we come to this, that planning is one of those interesting things. This is a planning level exercise. We're not getting down to the dirt, to the details. We're really just trying to narrow our focus as we move forward. And I know everyone has differing opinions about where we are, and sort of, I hope that we can really agree upon really two main principles, in my opinion. One is our ability to connect communities in a non-motorized way throughout North Kitsap, and honestly throughout the entirety of Kitsap County. The other piece for me is that we have, I think, an obligation to make sure that the amenities, whether it's open space, et cetera, that we have for the public is accessible to everyone, regardless of their ability. So I really keep that lens on first and foremost in front of my mind, because we have so much. We are very resource rich in many ways in this community. And if we don't share that richness with everybody, then I think we lose. So I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate your willingness to sort of maybe step back, step out of the lens you might have brought tonight, and over the next several months as this planning process goes forward, so hopefully that we can together realize that vision in a way that offers balance, and likely it's going to be compromise, right? It's all about how we move together. We're all rowing in the same direction. Any of those wonderful metaphors that we could use. But thank you all for being here. It's a sunny night, one of our first ones, but I'm glad you're spending it with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, as part of that. So tonight, why are we here, as Commissioner Gill was pointing out, is this is the map he was talking through, is the Sound Olympics Trail as we go through. And looking at the history of it, so the first part I'm going to walk through some of the history, some of the planning documents that got us here today. And then Jeff Ballman will be coming up and talking about the specific study and how we're going about this in the next 12 to 14 months as we go through. And so this is the Sound Olympics Trail. And it has many concepts, many breakdowns, and it has a long history as we go through. So we're going to review the North Kitsap Trails planning history and context, introduce the current planning process, and present potential trail alignments that are being considered for the STO between Kingston and the Port Gamble Heritage Park. We're not including the Port Gamble trail because that part has already had a feasibility study. It's moving towards construction. And also present draft criteria for doing that study. As Commissioner Keller was talking about, is we are looking at the planning level. How do we take that, the big community concepts? Because one of the reasons we're here is because of you as the community. Is that this group has gotten together as North Kitsap and identified concepts and ideas that have been incorporated into the county's planning process and how we've been working since that time, since 2011, before 2011, to advance the community concepts. And that's what we're doing here tonight. Advancing what the community asked us to look at, asked us to find, asked us to move, asked us to build. And that's what we're looking at. So our consultant team, the county has had a great consultant team going through it, have a lot of experience going through this. We have Jennifer Dvorak, right over here with engineering. We have Jeff Bama right here with planning. Also Phil Struck, there's Phil, environmental extraordinaire as we go through, move forward. And also some other, for geotech and some survey people and agricultural assessments, other part of the team. And this team is helping the county move forward with all the expertises that we want to have more information of. We want to have more skill levels adapted to this study. They have a lot of experience. The parametrics team is working on Port Gamble right now. Jeff Bauman has worked on 3 other feasibility studies for us, including Port Gamble, Jarstead, and the Divine Block that we're going to talk about today. And so these studies have been very important to us because they have advanced the concept from an idea, a community idea, to putting it down on the ground and moving it forward. And how does that community idea act like or look like on the ground? We also have a working group. This is a group of citizens that are helping us. They represent a lot of the people that have direct interests or represent interests in the group. So we have people from the North Kitsap Parks Advisory Board. We have someone from the North Kitsap Heritage Park Stewardship Committee, the Accessibilities and Disabilities Group for the county. We have the Kitsap County Parks Department because they are a major player and property owner. As we go through, right here, OPG was also a major player as a property owner going through that's been working with us on this. The Great Peninsula Conservancy is also represented on this group because they have a great stake in whether it goes through their property or not. We also have the North Kitsap Trails Association, who were instrumental, if not they actually did it, is the string of pearls that we're talking about. And also we have members from the Kitsap County's Non-Motorized Committee that have been volunteers to help the county, specifically Public Works, in bringing a community concept and a individual concept, a representative concept to the Kitsap County in our planning processes for non-motorized.
Excuse me.
And so we'll be having all questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, can we put Mark back here starting the working group? Just so that we know that's that.
No problem, it's part of that. So the general scope of this project, as the Commission governed, is connecting communities, parks, and open space between Kingston and Port Gamble Heritage Park with the shared use trail. Is how do we connect those as the community desires? They want to have this, you wanted to have this connection. How do we make that connection? This is a quick review. Jeff will be coming back. Our project schedule. We're very early in this. We're still in initial alternative selection screening as we go through. We still have many months before we get down to, and ultimately want to come up with a preferred alternative that feeds us to where the exact trail will go for. And even at that point, when we get to the study level, as we advance this project towards construction, there will be another aspect where we get down to the nitty-gritty of moving the line 10 feet this way, 15 feet that way with our design and engineering as we go forward. And it has a lot of history. From 2011, actually pre-2011 till now. This is not a concept that came out a decade ago and it's been sitting on the shelf. You have seen all the work that came into that first effort with the community and continually has been upgraded as we go through. It comes back from not only the trails concept of advancing the STO, but it comes back to the parks acquisitions and the impetus that the STO had in that process and how that was instrumental in having these parks, having these open space available to the public and the community. And the pivotal document coming through is the string of pearls, where the community came forward and said, we want a plan for North Kitsap on trails, not motorized. Taking the opportunities that were available or possibly available with the open space that's up here, and they came up with some plans. And the plan was that they want, part of the elements of it, for the STOs as we go through, is the North Kitsap Trail Association, who led that planning, had to prioritize a single spine of paved bike route connecting the Southville and Biggs Trail and on-road community connectors, bike routes, to support a wider network of unpaved trails. And that their top priority was to have this trail, this primary one, to access the thousands of acres that are possible up here that became parks, are still part of OBG, are part of the Conservancy, that have now advanced since the planning. But this is some of the impetus that led to that plan. And the Soundville and Biggs Trail was a shared use path to include walking, bicycling, and horseback. And that's one of the elements we're talking about here, is that this is a trail that the community asked for that was multi-use, that all ages of ability could use it. And that trying to do this, so that is our standard that we're looking for when we do this feasibility study. It's the community standards. Is how do we do a trail that does its connections, connects the communities, connects the parks, connects the open space in a manner that serves all ages and ability. And so that's the standards that we look to our criteria that we'll talk about later, that we're going to be studying. How can we do this? As everybody knows, the glaciers were not kind to Kitsap County. There's a lot of demanding topography out there and a lot of areas out there that we have to work around, find a way, and find a path. And in that plan, they identified at a very conceptual level how to connect that. And these are when the plan came out in 2011, it was adopted by the county. The county is a partner in that. That plan, as Commissioner Gelders, became part of our non-motorized plan that we had the plan in the 2013 version to the left. We reanalyzed that after we did the Park Gamble Trail and we updated the maps to show the new alignments for the Park Gamble Trail in 2018. So it has been a living document going through and iteration after iteration moving forward as we get more and more information and knowledge about where the route goes through. The next step that the county did working with the community is we started to look at, we need even more detail. The divide block, that's between Miller Bay Road and Port Gamble, that big OBG and Conservancy property, at this time it was all Olympic Property Group, is we did a study just like this. We brought the community together, we had a working group that had all very similar representation as we went through. And we worked through that in a very positive manner and came up with a great likely route. That's the yellow line coming through there to get through that property. Now, since that time, there's been some talk from specifically the North Kitsap Trails Association that maybe there's another alternative route that we're going to look at. And that's that purple line going through Warsaw and say, is that a better route? So that puts some questions in our minds as we go through, what is the best way to get through the divide block? We did the feasibility study in 15, but maybe we need to revisit that based upon some information. The next one we did is we went on to the Port Gamble and we did a feasibility study. That was the last time I'd been in a big public meeting here. We had 160 people flocked into this for, I think it was 2 or 3, I can't remember exactly how many open houses. Extremely great environment. And that they worked with us and we took the alignment that came from the string of pearls, that's the thing on the right. We walked through the process, we walked through a number of different alternatives, trying to find what is the route that goes there, what works best for the environment, for the user, for the park. And we came up with this new alignment. It's predominantly the black and the blue is the primary, and a secondary alignment based on some opportunities that OPG and their master plan for Port Gamble had as we went through. And that plan's played dividends. I'll start at the bottom here, is that section A, B, and B, which are right at the top there, A, B, and B right there, is we've advanced that. We received a grant from the Kitsap Public Facilities District to do preliminary engineering. And so we are designing that to go for construction, which some partial grants, partial federal grants, and county road fund, to connect, to build that first section of the Port Gamble Trail. And that comes from the feasibility. We're also learning some great deal because our engineering team happens to be the same team that we have on this study, are learning a lot on how to take the feasibility study into design. And what were we missing in the feasibility study that's coming up in design and vice versa. So we're learning ahead. So they're ahead of us and they're feeding back into the system to make this feasibility study that we're working on even better. Also, this part up here is Rainier, the Olympic Property Group, is also advanced their schedule. So they will be building a road up to the access to the park right here that we're looking at. How do we incorporate those elements into our plan? Because they moved up their schedule significantly to accommodate that. And so that left us in 2020. We did the Port Gamble study. We're moving together trying to get money to advance it towards preliminary engineering construction. What are we missing in the North STO? And the North STO is that Kingston section right here, that purple. What are we missing? Some of the things we found out is between the divide block, actually right here, and Port Gamble, we didn't know how are we going to get past Cross Bond Road? No one's, they've done some high level stuff, but it's a tough road to get across. How are we going to get across? That's a big question. We didn't want to jump into engineering. We had that question about the divide block, that alternative. We need to do some more work about that. And also, the area between Miller Bay Road and Norman Road, basically, yeah. The park area. How do we get between those? We've never done any advanced studies. So that was the area we were missing. We needed to do a feasibility study. And what about the community connectors? You know, the connections down to Indianola and out to the new development at Arborwood. And so that's what we worked on. We had some questions. So we went out and searched and were able to get a federal grant to do what we're doing right now, to look at this section, to fill out the missing pieces in the Sound of the Olympics. And so we have our planning process, and now Jeff will be coming up and talk to you about what is this feasibility study? How are we doing this? How are we taking your vision as a community and bringing it forward?
Thanks, David. Thanks for that background. My name is Jeff Balma. I'm with Fisher Balma Partnership. I'm a landscape architect and trail planner. I'm excited to be working on this project. As you heard from David, many years of community planning resulted in the String of Pearls plan and its vision for a shared use path across North Kitsap from Kingston to the Hood Canal Bridge. Our task as a planning team is to continue to bring that vision closer to reality. Over the last several months, there have been a significant amount of community input. Because of that, the county has decided to widen the study area. And so we're considering and evaluating a wider range of potential trail options in this study. Beyond those that were documented in the plans and policies that you just saw David summarize. In the last couple months, the first couple months of this study, we've identified almost 60 trail segments that we'll be taking a look at. The goal being to find the most suitable segments, link those up, and to find a route across North Kitsap. So I want to talk a little bit about the planning process. This is the graphic schedule we saw earlier. We're currently in Tier 1, which is the first red box there. In Tier 1, we're collecting data. We are determining segments and the criteria to screen those segments. As I mentioned, there's the wider study area. We have created this really nice website and web mapping tool. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I encourage you to go to the project website, take a look at that tool. We've had a significant number of field visits, two of which were with the working group members. Full day visits to really explore a good portion of the segments that you're going to see tonight. We're having our first public open house. The goal being to get you guys up to speed on where we are in the process. I think there's a misconception in the community that this route's been figured out, that we're even into design and engineering. That's not the case. We're at the beginning of this planning study. And then moving forward after this meeting, the next couple of months, we'll be with the working group, with the planning team, with the county. We'll be screening these different options based on the criteria I'll show you a little bit later. Hopefully that'll lead us to the second phase, which is tier 2. Finding all those most suitable routes. Hopefully we can link those together and have 2 or 3 alternative alignments that we can look at in even more detail, apply more detailed screening criteria to those, and come up with a preferred alternative. As you can see here, we'll have another public meeting about halfway through that process. A preferred alternative won't be selected at that point. At that next meeting, we'll want to bring you up to speed on how that screening of the initial segments worked and where we are in the process of evaluating those 2 to 3 preferred alternatives. Then hopefully that leads us to the third phase, which is documenting the preferred alternative. This will be a report to the county. This report should include the costs associated with the preferred alignment and the feasibility for implementing this trail. Not only the trail, but the mitigation and restoration required and associated with that. It's likely during this phase as well that we'll have more detailed field studies that are needed. Field surveys, for example, will look at areas of steep slopes, critical areas assessments to determine and map those critical areas that might be close or adjacent to the preferred alignment. So we move on from the process, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the segments that we're considering right now. We're going to be looking at several maps like this. You can see there's lots of squiggly, colorful lines. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the maps around the room. You can do that after the meeting as well too. We'll look at several maps with some of these trail options. Before we do that, though, I'd encourage you to go online and play around with the map, the digital interactive map that's online. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, much like a Google map. You can turn on layers, turn off layers. There's all kinds of critical areas, layers, wetlands and streams, wetland buffers, steep slopes. There's parcel information, property ownership information, all kinds of things that you can turn on and off. Really look to see the data that we're using and see it for yourself.
Is that website?
Yes, it's at that. You can go to that link right there. And good point. There's also a little note on your chair. I think David mentioned it is not a raffle ticket. It's a link to the website. So because we've identified these 60 initial segments, the best way to, I think, present those to you tonight and to kind of think about those are in 3 different zones within the project area. We've identified the west zone, the central zone, and the east zone. The west zone is from essentially the south end of Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park over to Miller Bay Road, which is that first yellow line on the left-hand side. The central zone from Miller Bay Road essentially to Norman Road, also the east side of North Kitsap Heritage Park, and the east side of the White Marsh development. And then that's that second yellow line, and then the east zone, obviously, from there to the town of Kingston. Before I start going through these in detail, just want to let you know that we're not going to necessarily talk about the pros and cons of each one of these segments tonight. Hopefully during the question and answer period, if you have comments about any particular segment.
When you get to that part of the question and answer.
So the question and answer period will be there'll be 30 to 45 minutes of Q&A after the presentation. Once we go through the presentation, we'll be taking questions from the audience as well as those online. So the pros and cons, really we'll be looking at each of these segments based on a bunch of criteria that we're developing, and I'll go through those criteria in just a minute as well.
What's the red, green, yellow mean?
So I'll get to that. So the green line is essentially a combination of routes that make up a particular segment. And we're going to look at a bunch of routes in this west zone. We're going to look at the west zone first, so moving left to right on the map, or from west to east. Starting at the yellow star, which is the parking lot at Stottlemyre. It's at the southern end of the Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park. The square, yellow square in the center for your reference is the parking lot at North Kitsap Heritage Park on Miller Bay Road. And the star on the right-hand side is essentially the town of Kingston. So for this particular route, the shared use path would utilize the Stottlemyre, the Bond Road, and Highway 104 right-of-ways. In this particular route, it would go underneath Bond Road in a tunnel, through a tunnel, directly east, crossing Port Gamble Road. It would then go in through private property in an existing easement into the divide block. The divide block is this block right here that's outlined in black. This is owned by Rainier, the timber company. In this particular case, it would run up through the northeast corner of the divide block and then east on Crawford Drive, through some critical areas, up steep slopes and through some private property which would require an easement to Miller Bay Road. This option is also similar in that it goes underneath Bond Road in a tunnel, crosses Port Gamble through the private property easement and through the divide block. But in this case, it continues east and goes into Great Peninsula Conservancy land, which is shown with that kind of bluish gray outline box right here. It would cross Grover's Creek and end up at Miller Bay Road in the vicinity of the parking lot for North Kitsap Heritage Park. This study was, or this route was identified in the 2015 feasibility study that was done for the county.
But these are not connected communities. I mean, this is connecting one parking lot to another parking lot. I mean, you guys are asking.
I'd encourage you to listen to the full presentation, and then once you have a question about it, you could bring that up.
I don't know. I mean,
That would be the respectful thing. Thank you.
no, I don't. I think what you're doing is disrespectful because you guys ask for community inputs. We are saying it's an initial planning, but we are bringing specific road alternatives for us to consider.
You will see that there's dozens and dozens of options to consider at this point. We're not.
But you said.
Sir, can you just let him do the presentation, because I think it will become more
No, you're not
apparent.
answering a question so far. We've been speaking for half an hour.
We're gonna answer the questions later. Let's listen to his presentation. I have concerns too, but let's listen to the presentation.
We'll be here till 8 o'clock. Let us summarize everything. If we start answering questions now, it's going to go off the rails.
Can you please get to the boards?
Get the
Can we get to the board stuff, please?
Please continue. Please let him continue.
This option here, instead of going under Bond Road, go up to the intersection and cross the light. You would use the Port Gamble Road corridor and the Gratitude Way corridor into the divide block. Instead of going east into GPC property, it would actually cut southeast through GPC property to Horseth Road. There's a crossing over Grover's Creek now, and then end up at the Miller Bay Road area a little bit further south of the parking lot of the park. And then finally for this zone, the road would use the Stottlemyre and Gunderson Road, road corridors. So just for a visual, I'm gonna flip through these again, just so you remember. Bond Road and 104, divide block to the northeast, divide block and GPC block, and alteration on that going to the southeast to the GC block, and then the southern route, Stottlemyre and Gunderson. We'll now look at the central zone. Once again, we have the Highway 104 corridor to the north, the West Kingston Road corridor from Miller Bay to Norman Road on the east. This one here goes from the parking lot at North Kitsap Heritage Park, utilizing an existing road cut, probably an old logging road, to the Beaver Pond crossing, which exists now on the east side of the park. This version goes up some steep slopes to the spine trail within the park, back down those slopes to the Beaver Pond crossing on the east side of the park. This is another variation utilizing trails within the park. This version stays on the west side of the park through existing trails, exiting the park at southeast or southwest corner to the power line trail. The existing power line trail runs east-west, just outside of the park in an easement on tribal property, tribal trust land. Then through the White Horse development to the east side of that. And then finally, an option that starts further south on Miller Bay Road, goes through private property, which would require an easement. That's the existing gravel pit, for those of you familiar with it. Once again, to the power line trail east to through the White Horse development. So I'm going to briefly flip through those again, north to south. We have Highway 104, West Kingston Road, Northern Park, Spine Line, a variation on the Spine Line Trail, the Power Line Trail, and a variation on the Power Line Trail.
That's an Indian road.
Okay, we'll get to that. So you might be asking, what if a particular route in one of these zones, as I've presented tonight, excuse me, doesn't necessarily line up with a route in another zone that's preferable or most suitable. That means we're going to need to look at Miller Bay Road itself as a potential corridor for that trail. Some of that work's been done in a study in 2008. The county looked at that, so we're in the process of looking at that study. We'll also need to be looking at the crossing of Miller Bay Road itself, and that's been identified by the different yellow symbols on this green highlighted line.
I just want to make sure I understand that one of the options is to follow Miller Bay Road itself. Is that what you're just saying?
For example, if one of the routes on this side comes into Miller Bay Road, say in a northern area, and that's the most suitable, and we find a suitable route down here that comes in to the southern portion of Miller Bay Road, in order to connect those two most suitable routes, we may need to use Miller Bay to link those, correct?
What about, one of the options you had was Gunderson, and then what about taking from Gunderson to Miller Bay Road to?
Yeah, that's what I just showed. So if you were to link this, if this was the most suitable, and there's a suitable route up here, we're going to have to look at looking at Miller Bay to connect those. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you've understood it correctly. So finally, we're going to look at the east zone. Once again, starting from the north, we have the Highway 104 road corridor as an option. The West Kingston Road corridor is an option. Starting from the Beaver Pond crossing on the east side of the park, heading north in the Norman Road corridor to West Kingston Road. We have another option that starts in the same place on the east side of the park, but cuts off of Norman Road, goes through county property where the treatment plant is located, north through some private property, which would require an easement, again to West Kingston Road. This option also starts on the east side of the park, but instead of going north, jogs south into the Arborwood development. For those of you not familiar, this purple outline box is a planned community of several hundred homes The shared use path has been engineered and permitted through that development already, as shown in the highlighted line. This would then link into South Kingston Road up to town. This is a variation. Instead of starting at the park, it would start at the White Horse development, also cutting up through the Arborwood neighborhood to South Kingston Road. And then finally, from the White Horse development, using just South Kingston Road, if for some reason the route through Arborwood was not feasible. I'm going to flip back through these a moment again, from north to south: Highway 104, West Kingston Road, Norman Road cutoff, Arborwood, and Arborwood starting further south. And then also South Kingston. So those were the trail segments, organized in such a way that lets you know that there are 60 different segments that made up all those different routes. We're going to be looking at each one of those individual segments. We're going to be applying some criteria to those. And I want to go through those criteria with you here briefly. The criteria are similar to those used in several different other trail studies in North Kitsap over the last 5 years, as well as in the String of Pearls plan. Those criteria are being modified by the working group and by the planning team to update those. Each of the 60 segments we talked about will have multiple, if not all, criteria applied to those segments. At this level for tier 1, because we have so many to rate, we will be doing this at a high level based on the existing data available. For example, we may rate a particular segment low, medium, or high based on an individual criteria. Do that for all the criteria, then look at those criteria cumulatively for that segment to determine if that segment itself has low, medium, or high suitability for shared use trail.
So one of the questions we're asking about the alternatives, it's like, what Jeff showed you was not exactly alignments. They were examples as he went through. If you look on the website, each one of those lines in there have a lot of small microsegments, C15, C13, A15, 15. What Jeff did in those alignments was to give you some examples of how you can combine them. It's not exclusive, as we went through. And also what we're going to be asking, one of the questions we're asking tonight is, are we missing an alignment? I heard Indianola. If you look on the website, that is one of them. It wasn't exampled here, but in Indianola, going all the way around from the south side, is one of the alignments that is identified on our map as we went through, that we will look at the first stage and go through it. So it is one of the questions we're asking tonight. Did we miss a segment? And again, the ones we have up here were examples to show you. And the key points that he was trying to explain is that there isn't one, you can't just right now go and say there's one best alignment between the two. It's acknowledging that there are 3 zones here that have different sometimes conflicting benefits. And that trying to connect those is what we're going to be doing. Is how do you find the best route through each one? And what's the relationship to where they connect to? Because we do want to connect communities, open space, and parks. It's not going to a parking lot. It's going to connect communities and a spot. And so that's what we're working on. And so that's what the questions we're asking. So I just wanted to jump on that before we got into criteria to do that.
Thanks, David. As I mentioned in the planning process, the second to last bullet, the screening of segments and the tier 1 analysis will lead to more advanced and detailed analysis of individual alignments in tier 2. We've identified 5 main categories of criteria. Those are connecting communities, parks and open spaces, environmental and cultural, safety, user experience, and project delivery. I'll go through examples of sub-criteria in each one of these criteria that we'll be considering and using to rate these trail segments. For connecting parks, communities, and open spaces, does that trail segment provide access to those communities, parks, and open spaces? Does it support regional non-motorized connectivity? Does that segment meet the goals of the String of Pearls plan? Does it promote equity? Does it connect neighborhoods? Does it meet community needs for recreation? And then does it meet community needs for more transportation related goal? For environmental and cultural, does that segment have impacts to wildlife and connectivity corridors? Obviously, a trail through a park probably will have more of an impact than a trail located along an existing road corridor that already exists. Are there impacts to wetlands, the priority habitat and species associated with those? What are the impacts to the streams, and what are the number of crossings or bridges that need to be installed or replaced? Not just the impacts, but when we look at these segments, is there actually a net environmental benefit when you consider restoration and mitigation associated with a certain trail segment? So we'll be looking at that, and fortunately we have a great biologist on the team to help us through that. We'll also consider stormwater and quality and quantity for each of the segments. Steep slopes, geotechnical, potential partnerships, and cultural resources. We have a cultural resource specialist on the team, so understanding where those cultural resources might be relative to various segments. We'll be considering safety. So does a segment, does it have potential user vehicle conflicts? Obviously, trails along road corridors will have a higher potential for issues at major roadway crossings and at driveway crossings. And then on the segment itself, are there user conflicts due to, say, the slope of the trail or switchbacks on that section of trail? What are the adjacent road travel speeds and volumes? And what are the surface or the slope and surface conditions for any given segment? User experience is important. What are the perceived safety and stress levels? Obviously, a trail right next to a busy road is going to have a different perception of safety for those people that are on it and affect user experience. Does the segment provide access to the natural environment, wildlife, and an opportunity for education, for personal enjoyment? Does it provide an opportunity to link to places that have used natural settings and connect points of interest along the trail? Importantly, too, is the trail one that promotes use by the widest range of ages and abilities? So access and elevation change. We all know from biking, it's fun to go downhill if it's not too steep. It's fun to have gently rolling hills, but it's not fun to go a steep slope. And then finally, project delivery. So what will the cost be of any particular segment? The design and construction costs, like I said, not just the trail, but for mitigation and restoration as well. And what are the long-term maintenance costs? Different trail segments are going to be more difficult to maintain depending on where they're at, their slope, what's around them. We're going to be looking at the adopted policies and land uses for every individual parcel that the trail goes through. It's not an easy solution. There's a lot of complexity, so we're in the process of looking through that. As I mentioned, the right-of-way requirements, the right-of-ways typically aren't wide enough to accommodate an additional shared use trail and the separation needed for that. So are there easements adjacent to those right-of-ways that we can get to add those trails? And then finally, what will the different granting agencies fund? That could have a potential impact on various segments or the routes made up from those segments. So that's the end of the formal presentation. We're now going to move into the Q&A. We'd like to encourage you to ask questions so we can provide clarification. If you do have open-ended comments, We ask that you limit those to 1 minute, just based on the number of people that are here and online. If you do have open-ended comments, we'd really love them to focus on the segments we've talked about, the criteria that we've presented. If you are online and listening, I believe there's a Q&A box. You can submit comments to. Those will be fed to us, and we'll intersperse those in with comments and questions from the audience here tonight. And if not everyone gets a chance here tonight to provide information or a question or comment, you can do so online in the county's project website comment box.
Just one thing I want to mention real quick. When we do get a question, can you repeat the question? Oh, they are. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so one other thing, there is a mic up here. So if 3 or 4 people want to come up at a time, we obviously don't want to line every single person lined up along the edge. But if you could come up here and use this mic here, that would be appreciated.
If you have a mobility problem, raise your hand and we'll come bring the mic to you. Right, certainly.
So I have one correction to make before I make my comment. Could you flash up the working group slide, please? What I heard was that all the groups listed there were represented, and I think that's a mischaracterization. Mr. Fort made it clear that there are only 3 groups that are actually represented, that being OPG, Great Peninsula Conservancy, and the Parks Department. So the stewards, of which I'm a member, have one of our people, Jay Siski, very competent on the group, but he's flying solo like everybody else. So I think it's important to realize that that's how the working group was set up.
Working group includes members, as you noticed, from the non-motorized committee, the Parks Board, the Parks Department, the property owners who went through. As part of that, it has a representative, an active member. They are individuals. They are not representing their groups. They are acting as advisors to the study team. The working group does not make any decisions. They advise the project team, and we are responsible for all decisions that come forward. They are volunteering their time to assist us and are providing perspectives from all the representative groups and as individuals as we go forward.
We'll agree on that. Anyway, my name is Joe Lubisher. I am a steward with North Kitsap Heritage Park. And I'd like to address the necessity for shared information in order to have good public participation. So my first request is really simple, that you provide a link on the project page that'll take people to all the reference materials. Okay. The second one is to add 2 documents to those reference materials. The one is the conservation easement on the North Kitsap Heritage Park, and the other is the Parks Recreation and Open Space Plan, known as the PROS plan. The third thing is I find the timeline presented on the project page and tonight to be kind of incomplete, to the point of being inaccurate and misleading. There's a lot of things that's happened over the last 10 years that aren't up on those. And I'll put that in my online comment, but there are 3 things that I think are really important worth mentioning. The first is in 2014, the county granted a conservation easement to protect habitat. It was applied to the east half of the park. That's a legal document, and I think it ought to be out there for people to look at. And it's certainly important for you to consider right up front in looking at these routes. The second one, 2018, was when the PROS plan was updated. There's a lot of language in there. In fact, 15% of that plan is about habitat. The STO is mentioned, it has 1 line. And then the heritage parks are are characterized for being very important for their natural characteristics. And that some things are going to have to be limited to preserve those. Now, again, I understand that the study is pushing aside the pros plan, but I think it's really important for the public to talk about how these things come together. You know, we have a non-motorized plan, we have a pros plan, and they're not lined up together when it comes to this issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Thank you.
Other time limit?
Yes, we ask you to keep it to 1 minute. Thank you. And one question. Thank you very much. And one thing I remind is that that's why we have the Parks Director on our working group. That's why we have a Parks Advisory Board member on our group. And that's why we have the Heritage Park Stewards on the group. Thank you. Hold it, actually, you got 1 second, sir.
You know, we have a couple online. Going in your specific. Okay. Hi, one online attendee has asked, can we expand more upon the equity criteria? How will we measure promoting equity?
Yes, we will look at that as part of that. I don't have an answer right now. As part of that, equity has many definitions, and definitely we will be looking at that and refining it. Sir.
Good evening. Thanks for coming, guys. I'm Dr. Tom Doty. I'm going to read this because I will tend to rant otherwise. I'm Dr. Tom Doty, a population biologist and herpetologist. A little closer. I'm Dr. Tom Doty. I'm a population biologist and herpetologist retired. I know you'll expect an amphibian rant from me, but Rob has repeatedly told me he doesn't much care about the amphibians in the park, so let's change the subject a bit.
Not get personal.
I'm not here for the frogs and salamanders. I'm here for the ecosystem. Another component of our local ecosystem that will be negatively impacted by this project are the diminishing populations of small mammals, mice, shrews, voles, moles, etc. A large group, food for local predators. Just one of many insults to these species is the barrier effect of roads. I hear no concern being expressed about this threat to small mammal populations. Just Rico et al. in 2007 published research on this phenomenon, citing Foreman and Alexander in 1998, who referred to road avoidance effect among small mammals. They found low species diversity and low abundance of small mammals near roads, shrews, voles, and mice. This is unrelated to surface composition and unrelated to traffic. That has to do with an open canopy and lack of surface debris in these clear-cut swaths. Subjects mammals to greater risk of predation, exacerbated by the mowing of the verges, the edges of these roads. Therefore, there's more movement they found along the roads and away from the roads than across the roads. The ultimate effect in North Kitsap Heritage Park will be the division of the park into 3 sections that will not be crossed by small mammals. The ultimate effect of this is a narrowing of the genetic diversity and a reduction in the viability of these small mammal populations. This is just a bad idea for profit to diminish small mammal populations.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Doug Neiman. I had one comment about the maps, which is request around accessibility. I'm an IT accessibility specialist and have been for 25 years. And the map having red, yellow, purple line, it makes it an accessibility issue, people's color blindness. So if you chose to do X's, circles, some other kind of standard, then it provides people that are that have color blindness the ability to access those different routes. I think this meeting's heatedness partially is everybody trying to get their comment in a short time. And I think if we had some sort of forum online that had guidelines around not insulting people and some standards of etiquette that people could comment on some other forum with the county, we could get in more of our thoughts and and be able to do that and see other people's ideas and brainstorm and not be like, oh, I should get this in a minute. And lastly, I just wanted to say, if this route's going to go in and going to meet accessibility standards, it needs to follow like the 1 to 20 slope guidelines for, no breaks, or 1 to 12, which is quite a low slope if people have seen that laid out like wheelchair ramps outside. So I would prefer, if it's going to go through part of the park, it would go around that north end where it could stay at the 7 foot above sea level and stay along the contour and not require switchbacks carving up the middle of the park. Thank you.
And so the standards we use for accessibility are federal highway standards for shared use paths is the standard that we will be assessing towards. And they're slightly different than an ADA slope on a ramp, but they have the standards that we look forward to. And one more on.
Online question, what are the options for the surface of these trails? Must they be paved?
And this is, we're starting out with what the standards are. We looked at the community, it was asked for a pave. And shared use standards are for pave. And we will be looking at all surfaces we went through. That is the standard we're looking at. If there's rationales of why we don't use that surface, we will look at the performance of that surface and whether it still meets our ADA accessibility standards to move forward.
Challenge 3, I believe, in the last. So at the very beginning, you mentioned that you kept bringing this, one of the goals of this project is to connect communities. Now, throughout all these plans, if you think about the Kingston community, the major communities, Huntsville, Indianola, Squamish, parts of Colesville, none of these routes connect any of these communities together. They don't bring people living in Indianola. It doesn't increase any bit my access to any other neighboring communities. So if that's your goal, can you explain to us how these proposed segments are indeed connecting these local communities together?
Connectivity is a system. And if you look at the string of pearls, you see a system of a spine and connectors. Those connectors are formalized trails, other trails, roads, and moving forward with online facilities. Right now, we're talking about advancing the STO element of that system. As an example, in 2018, our non-motorized committee took the Kingston's trails plan that your community has worked on, that has identified all the connectors going through those. And we went through a public process of taking that plan and integrating what elements fit into the non-motorized plans going through. So this is not a standalone element. This is part of the system. And what we're working on tonight is how do we advance this one element of the system? And that is the connections of the communities in the STO system with the open place and the parks. And so it is that concept. We can only work on one thing at a time. We work on all the elements. We are still working on other aspects of the community connections, especially at public works, especially when you consider the work we're working on SR 104 and the Main Street and the connector going through. And those are the aspects. So we look at this as a system, and this is one element that we're advancing. Sir.
My name is Ben Stroll. I believe you've got this thing mislabeled. I hear this term STO all the time, which I understand means Sound to Olympics. Well, as a bicyclist right now, if I was riding from Kingston or Bainbridge Island and I wanted to get to the Olympics, there's some pretty crappy road shoulders that I have to ride on because Kitsap County doesn't believe in maintaining shoulders to the roads. Go ride Miller Basin. Lucky if you get 2 inches outside the fog line. So instead of this pie in the sky trail system, and I see these trails that are all these squiggly lines, which means they're not straight, they're going up and down through, I've been out there in that territory. I know how steep and up and down it is, but why doesn't the county start by committing something to, they have these string of pearls Yeah, you've got pearls with this piece of crappy twine in between. You can't ride from Heritage Park to Port Gamble safely on a road because there's no shoulder, there's no development. Put some effort into that first, then look at your pie in the sky trails off through the bushes, okay?
One thing I'd like you to look at, when you go home, it's gonna be light, or you do it the next time. Look at the road you're on. Look what's on at the end of that shoulder. So when you try and say that, hey, follow the road, fill out the road, instead of trying to find the best route through, look at that trail, see what you're going through. See what it would take to add a shoulder, see what it would take to add a shared use path next to that road you're going through. We've talked about what the area is going through, divide block, what type of topography we're going through. We're going up hills. There are no roads over here that go east-west that don't go up hills. We want to look at, thank you very much, ma'am, please, as we go through. So just look at those. So there are no easy solutions. And so this is one of the concepts that came from the community is how to connect us. That's what we looked at. And we do look at all the roads. We have a program, a transportation improvement program that addresses those and works on this as advanced. Again, it's a network. And by advancing this, the concept is that we can find the best way to move through it. Is that too early? Let's go with it. That's all right.
I'm Beth Nichols from Indianola, and I think the STO sounds like a great amenity for people, but what about the creatures that have been displaced already? In the last 10 years, so much has changed in habitat in North Kitsap. We have had rampant logging. You look at Arborwood, it's devastated.
Yeah.
The impact to North Kitsap Heritage Park is heartbreaking. I spent the spring lifting salamanders and toads and little frogs over that silt fence. The impact is absolutely horrifying. And if we have another cumulative impact with trails going through, and like other people have said, those lines are up steep hills across wetlands. There's plant communities, there's creatures, there's rights of nature, not just amenities for people. And that's my big concern. My heart is with North Kitsap Heritage Park. Anything that goes through there should be only on the perimeter. We have to save that treasure park that's a little bit of remaining habitat in North Kitsap.
Online question. One person was wondering if we assume all the routing issues could get resolved this year or next, what would be an estimated time to completion? And are there funds available from grants?
And so as everything goes, projects take a long time. And so when we move up to, we find a alternative route, then we go into our prioritization system as we go through. We are working on Port Gamble right now. As part of that, we're doing working on the A, B, and D links going through. And as we move forward, our next prioritization will be going down and finishing in Port Gamble. At that point, then we'd be looking at what would be the next logical section. We don't know that because we don't know the alignment. But we do want to concentrate on the north STO versus the central or the south or other non-motorized path. And it'll be part of the study to give us a prioritization and a logical sequencing of construction. And this is what with funding is we have our money and we have other people's monies. Other people's monies is grants. And so it depends on what the solution is, what the preferred route is, on how well the projects will compete against other people to get funding. And it's like all the projects we work forward on. There could be very grand opportunities that we incrementally build it together. We could have a project that we could get a super fund type of funding moving forward. It's all going to depend on the solution, on its competitiveness in the grant process, and also available county monies as we move forward, like all of our projects.
Hello, my name is Lynn Shorn. I have been part of this project since 2007. I'd like to say thank you to all of the volunteers that work in the parks in Kitsap County. Scotch broom removal, planting trees, taking care of the salamanders, et cetera, et cetera. I just want to remind everyone that North Kitsap Heritage Park, as well as Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park, would be developed lands if we did not have the foresight years ago to purchase these lands from Rainier for the public. So coming in the voice of climate change as well, is I am wanting to decrease our cars in Kitsap County, if at all possible. I feel like decreasing our emissions, our gas emissions, will assist our creatures, our amphibians, our animals, our four-legged creatures, more than anything that we can do.
Thank you.
I have Pauline in Monterey Estates, just a really quick question. Can this avoid North Kitsap Heritage Park? Can this project just avoid it? Is there a way to go around it with all these different options? It's kind of bored, but can this be avoided? That's all that.
That's what we're trying to figure out. As part of that, what is the best way? What are things? Because when you look at the
Best way to just be avoided.
well,
like,
is it?
Go the other way. Because like, wouldn't it be quicker to just like have, you know, if we're trying to get to the Olympics and to the coast, wouldn't it just be, seems kind of, I don't know, convoluted to go through the park. It just seems like it's, I don't know, it's kind of complicated. Wouldn't it be better, like, just, yeah, I guess it does, yeah. That's my question, like, it can be avoided, and if it can, that's great. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And it's talking about that's what we're looking at, the connections going through. And as Jeff was pointing out, is when you look at the criteria, you look at environmental impacts, you look at what is actually the best A to B. It takes an analysis to do it. Some of these options may be significantly better for the environment than others. And some of those could be through the park. And that's what we want to look at. What is the best way? Because if we choose arbitrarily to move off and say, hey, let's take this other route, and it is devastating to the environment, significantly worse, is that the real option? As we went through it. Because it is one, and the other key component on the criteria is that we want to have access to the parks and the open space. And how do you provide that? And I mean access to everybody. Because when we went, it is surprisingly, when you go out to one of these parks, see how far you can go in there if you have mobility issues. I can tell you how far you can go. Because with one of our field trips, we thought we mapped out the way for one of our people that had access that are on the advisory group. And we thought we could get that person into the park significant portions. I mean, we mapped it out as much as best we could. See, one access, we got 40 yards before the mobility issue stopped that person from going in. On another access, well, we got in about quarter mile, a little bit more than a mile, but that was fighting the whole way and taking assists to assist her to get in. We came in the other way, did pretty well. She got in maybe a little bit further court, but then immediately, a small thing.
Could you cite where you're talking about? Are you talking about North Kitsap Heritage Park?
Yes, ma'am.
You are aware that the stewards at North Kitsap Heritage Park have constructed the only ADA path constructed in any heritage park in Kitsap County. I've been a steward since 2013. ADA access has never come up until you guys use it for a rationale to build this road. We have constructed an ADA path at Miller Bay Road that goes between a couple of ponds. The fellow in the chair who has been advising us points out with a smile on his face, that's nice, fellas, but it isn't long enough. The stewards at North Kitsap Heritage Park have cited 5 areas on our map which you all ignore. 5 areas on our map where ADA access would be easily constructed. Significant ADA access. From Whitehorse, I've been maintaining for years that 15 guys with 15 wheelbarrows and shovel skills could provide access.
We're fine.
Could provide access
Thank you.
via Whitehorse entrance. You guys just ignore that.
Well, I have to disagree with that, because I'm just talking about
Please
the
do,
experience.
and tell me where you went in where you got 60 yards.
That was from the parking lot,
Which parking lot?
the only parking lot.
Yeah, 3 parking lots.
The major part. Miller Bay Road.
Miller Bay Road. And you went down the ADA path that we constructed, the stewards constructed.
Yes, the one,
ponds.
yes, the one with.
It wouldn't be
the one,
there had we not forced.
Excuse me, can I answer your question? Thank you.
Please do.
Yeah, the one with the stormwater facilities that are just perfect size for wheelchairs to get caught in.
Where?
The wooden
That's
stormwater.
not from Miller Bay Road, not the entrance you're talking about.
That's where we were. All right, so we're there or here? Over here.
That tripartite waterworks you're talking about is in the middle of the park where no one would have access.
I think they make it clear that they don't do
Question
it.
from online. Will the selection criteria include potential benefit to traffic safety with alignments along the roadway? Miller Bay Road and Gunderson Road is going to be much busier in the near future, and the joint bike/auto safety improvement projects will be welcomed and needed.
For the safety aspects, we'll be analyzing the safety of trails going through. And the aspects will be safety all over, so it'd be the vehicle conflicts, whether they're on the road or off the road. As part of that.
So, I mean, one comment before my question. Okay, one comment before my question. It's interesting, you mentioned about following the road and then you put a picture over there, shows a road cutting through the woods. It's interesting because you look at that one and think you get inspired yourself, but I look at that one, all I see is that one waste and asphalt put into nature. So for me, you say follow the road, but I think this community is making clear that we want to enjoy the nature together. We don't want to follow the road, go from ferry to the Root Canal Bridge. We don't need that. I don't think we do. I mean, if anybody wants, thinks that we do need that, please speak. Okay, let's get in line and speak about it. My question is, all of these communities also, we have tribes here, right? So are you working with the tribes in your plans? Are you taking into account their considerations? Because part of this heritage we are talking is their heritage too.
Yes, we are coordinating with the tribes.
But they were not listed on your working group.
No, they're not on our working group, but we coordinate with them.
Okay, so what are their input? What's their questions? How are you coordinating with them?
There are questions today, so there are questions that we go through, and they are waiting to see where the study goes. We brief them exactly the briefing you have right now, and as we move forward, we'll be getting comments from them on each one of the steps.
Interesting, you used the word briefing because you started the meeting and asking us questions and further on you usually discuss. Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so, I'm Martha. So a question I have is the criteria. How did you come up with those? I think you're hearing tonight that some of the audience members might have other criteria, or they might value different criteria. So how did you develop the criteria? That was the question I had. For example, one of those is, is the decision of which route to take or whether you have to take a route based on whether you can get grant money, that's one of the criteria. Is it based on whether you can get partnerships? So those are things that maybe some people aren't that's not as important to some people as others. So how did you come up with the criteria and how would you evaluate those?
The criteria is very similar to the criteria we used in our prior studies, as with Port Gamble, with the divide block, Jarstead and South. And so there are some minor modifications and advancements on those. The subcategories you're talking about is project delivery. So that's part of that project delivery. Can you actually deliver the projects? And so the funding source, as was asked earlier, is always a question. How can you fund this project? And so we will be looking at, can grants help with this? But one thing the county we don't do is we do not build projects to seek grant funds. We prioritize our projects and then try and find grants that match that. Because we don't want to go out and chase grants, and we don't chase grants. We identify the projects, we prioritize the projects, then we look to see if we can get grants or other people's monies to help us build.
For example, that one thing I've been hearing tonight is people's desire to have a trail or a road to get from one place to another. Not necessarily a park, but like to get from Suquamish to Neola, to get from Suquamish to Kingston. And they can't do that, as it's been pointed out, but that's not really one of the criteria. It's funded.
Again, we're talking about the STO part of that network. As it's.
Question from online, what is the definition of shared use trails?
Shared use trail is a federal designation for a category of trail. And it is shared use trail is a minimum 10-foot wide paved path with 2-foot gravel shoulders on both sides, meeting the federal highways, FHWA, federal highways standards for ADA accessibility. Is what it's sure.
My comment is, there's lots of great comments there, and I'd like to make all of them, but the one I'm most focused on is the criterion things being brought up by several people within the lake that just preceded me. And that is, one of the criteria I didn't see in your list is what is the harm to the existing usage and those people that are the existing users. I almost every day I go out for a walk on the road around my home, get a little exercise like that. Or when I want to do something special, I go over to the North Kids at Heritage Park and go for a walk on the trails there. And it's a very different experience walking on the road, which when I look at that picture, I see a road. Maybe there's no cars on it, but it's a road. And compare that to walking on the trail with the forest closed, seeing the forest litter closed, and maybe seeing some animals and things like that. So it's just a really different experience than what you're offering here. And so I would encourage you to broaden the criteria to consider what harm we're doing to existing uses and harm we're doing to the existing uses.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carl Compton. Lived here for a very long time. Before the Heritage Park was the Heritage Park. So thank you for everything you guys have done, the community, the county, the planners, the state to help get the North Kids at Heritage Park. one thing I want to share, not only is to say thank you, but that I don't envy you your job. You know, but you've done a good job tonight for me, and that you've taken a complicated subject and you've tried to boil it down, and that's hard because there's so much information. But, and I know a lot of people in the audience, I assume a lot of people in the audience are like, no, you have not explained anything to me. I think you've done a good job at doing that, again, for me. But a suggestion would be to figure out a way, you've done pretty good tonight, but to better communicate with the public. Because I've heard the comments and the questions. And I think the comments and the questions reflect a disconnect between, you know, what you guys are doing and what the community is hearing. You know, and if it was me, I wouldn't know how to do it. That's why I don't envy you your job. But for me, your presentation tonight has given me more information. So thank you for that. I know I have the county website as a way to make comments that you guys can process and absorb. What you presented tonight helps me to go back and make a second comment about the trail alternatives that the study is going to be looking at. So thank you. That's all. Yeah. Thank you.
We are early in steps as part of that. Until we start getting information that we can analyze as part of that, I mean, we will communicate as we go forward. But we are just starting this. We are collecting information and advancing it as we go through. Over here. Okay.
All right, question from online. Didn't catch whether there have been transportation studies of the area to provide actual data on the potential carbon impact.
Again, we're early in the research. And one thing that is very difficult with non-overrides for walking, for biking, is to actually get data that can show a carbon footprint, any type of moving forward, because the numbers are, we run into the phenomenon of it's not here, so how we can assess it and build it, they shall come. And so we will be looking at those aspects, but we won't really be able to find any numbers that say this alternative is better for the carbon footprint than that alternative as we went through. It'll
But
be
you've
very
got the
difficult.
carbon footprint of the construction, of the asphalt, of
Yes.
all of that work, right?
I think that's what's being asked. Well, but that's being asked, we can figure that part out, but I was looking at it from a user perspective. We could have that as part of it.
Hello. My name is Pace Haynes. I lived here my whole life. I'm running for the 23rd House of Representatives, seat 1. And my understanding with this project is that it's mainly a transportation route. And the Kitsap Heritage Park is a destination, not a thoroughfare. We have several schools on one of the proposed routes that would benefit from the front of the school leading in both directions being improved to allow the students access to the divide park on one side and the ferry on the other side. I don't see any reason why we should divert these resources away from the middle school just to harass the Heritage Park Steward Group and give them a development project they don't want.
Hello, my name is Bart Shorn, and I've lived in Kitsap County for quite some time. And I've also been an avid bicycler and have spent the vast majority of my time on a bike. So I would like to kind of de-escalate the conversation a little bit, that to demonize the idea of a Silent Olympics bike trail because you don't want it to go through North Kitsap Heritage Park. The plan right now is to look at all these alternatives. So there isn't a, that this trail is gonna go through North Kitsap Heritage Park. This trail will provide a huge economic and environmental benefit to our community by allowing people to be able to get on their bike or walk to different communities. I myself live in Port Gamble. I would love the opportunity to be able to ride safely to visit my friends in Indianola. This trail would give me that opportunity. It would also give me the opportunity to ride into Kingston and have dinner. All those things take away myself from getting in a car to do that thing. Right now, for me to ride my bike to Indianola, as you all know, it's taking your life into your own hands because the roads are horrible. So please, let's not throw the baby out in the bathwater now, and let's be reasonable in our assessment. Allow the team to do the job that they have set forth to do, and that's to look at all the alternatives and see what the best alternative is. We'll have plenty of other opportunities to discuss this in the future. But again, let's not demonize the idea of a trail. Because I really do believe that there are good potentials out there to have a wonderful connected trail system that will be an environmental benefit to our county as we move forward and we have 400 more houses being built. You know, those people need to have access to the community, and not only by getting in their car and driving their car to wherever they're going. Please, environmentally, I think the Sound Olympics Trail will be of benefit to our community.
We'll do these three and one more online. Let's do one here first, then we'll go online.
Hi, Diane Iverson, a resident of the Kitsap Peninsula. I would be honored to live across the street from a paved shared use path that starts at the Kingston Ferry and goes to Port Gamble Park, or starts at the Bainbridge Ferry and goes to Poulsbo. I'd buy a home 100 feet from that trail. It is such a great idea. I am a walker, I am a cyclist, and I use a wheelchair. Our community, the entire peninsula, needs more places in our parks and in our neighborhoods so that people, no matter how they get around, can get around. In the last 2 years, I've cycled paved shared use paths throughout Puget Sound. I've seen more families, I've seen more little kids, I've seen more people in wheelchairs. The Port Angeles Sound Olympics Trail in 2020 had over 300,000 counts on it. And it was by people who live there. And you can even see the hour of the day that they show up to walk their dogs. So again, I want to thank the leadership of this county for having this discussion, and for, this is a dream that needs to be put on the ground, and I would be honored to help in any way I can. Thank you.
Question from online. Does the criteria for a shared use trail include a load bearing capacity? Specifically, must it be able to support any type of motor vehicle or emergency vehicle?
The load capacity is yes. We would, for local emergencies, it would need to set up for ambulances to come through. It's one of our criteria to look for. That's one thing. That's what we went through. And also for the standard maintenance type vehicles. The areas that we're looking at right now, when we went through and did the Port Gamble, we also had logging activity that we had to look at. For this section, there's no logging activities as part of that. So it is pure the trail plus any maintenance and emergency access vehicles, not big trucks, but not big fire trucks, but small ambulance types.
Hi, my name is Linda. I've been a long-term volunteer on parks and open space and trails in this area for a number of years. And I just wanted to, thank the county for all of their many years, decades of leadership, that we have this park and all the assets that we have in this community. And from our long involvement with the kids at Forest and Bay, we had tons of people with different opinions, different interests, but working together really constructively. And we accomplished great things for this community that will last forever by working together. And I would really hope and encourage people to try and take that spirit, because that is why we had so much success. And I believe this will be an asset and it can be routed successfully. I don't know exactly where, but the county has done just exemplary leadership to get us to this point in time. And I just want to appreciate and thank all of you who are involved in this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Blandmeyer. I've been here for a long time too. I really like and I'm looking forward to the STO. I really am. I also absolutely love the North Kitsap Heritage Park. I really like walking through it. I even ride my bike through it sometimes. I'm also a biker, a road biker. Used to ride 26 miles a day. But my dirt bike, I ride it a lot slower on the trails. You can't really go fast on those trails. One thing we all know who's been riding a bike on the side of the road, how dangerous it can be. And I feel the same way when I'm walking on those trails and a bike just goes by me real fast. When you're riding a bike for a long distance, it's not just lollygagging and going real slow and stopping for people or horses, if that's the case. To me, walking in the trails is a whole different experience, even if it's for someone on a wheelchair, than it is for someone that wants to rip through on their bike, which I like to do. And if I'm traveling, if I'm going to do 20 miles in a day, I'm not going to be just going through a little park. It would be nice to go through a little park, and it'd be nice not to have a 12-foot wide road, pavement, which I don't like being on when I'm walking on the road, and the moss that collects on it, especially in North Kitsap Heritage Park, where it would accumulate, still have to be removed. But I'm getting off the point. There's a place to walk and enjoy nature. There's also a place to maybe ride your bike through there, kind of slow. There's also a place to ride your bike kind of fast. And some of this STO trail, you can do that. You can ride fast on a dirt bike. You can ride fast on skinny tires on the road, and not zip by people that are just walking around. So there's a purpose for different ways to travel. And I just think that fast bikes and slow walks don't mix. The other thing that I came up here to talk about, it was asked by someone online, and I thought that was a real thoughtful thing. Will there be cars allowed? Well, it's so wide that cars can be on there. Emergency vehicles, I understand that, but I would rather North Kitsap Heritage Park be where no vehicles can go there. Because if vehicles can go there, they will. And I think that for some commercial purpose or eventually motor vehicles. And what was mentioned here about being a low carbon fuel emissions and lowering all that, I think to do that is to keep the trails like foot trails, dirt bikes, and make this STO, maybe some real nice thing on the side of the road, you know, like when I go up north by Port Angeles and stuff, we've ridden, Robin, you and I have ridden there, and that's nice, and it's a whole thing on the side of the road, nice long trails, that's really good, you know, and even people could walk there, but when I go through North Kitsap Heritage Park, my main purpose was saying, I love the park the way it is right now.
with nature the way it is right now, and I would just hate to see that destroyed in any way. But I really want the STO, you guys really have a real tough job, I could really appreciate it. I really appreciate your presentation here today to try and get us knowledgeable on what you guys are doing, and I look forward to being more involved with it. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, comments as we go through. So, so the quite other now I have to read my own comments here. Going through. So again, the comments we're looking forward to help us work in the next sections are: did we miss a segment? You know, what segment are we possibly missing that you want to look at? And the other one is criteria. You know, are we missing criteria? We had some of those comments today as part of that, but please send us in as you go through. And what will be the next open house? We don't have a specific date yet as part of that, but when we look at our schedule, needs to go out to 10 before you. Okay, November is part of that. And so what we're gonna be doing at that time is a lot of work as part of that. So we're gonna be looking at all those segments, gathering the data, looking at the criteria, gathering the criteria and trying to assess it. And what we want to bring back to you at the next one will be the screening of the events. And we start to whittle this thing down as we went through, because we have way too many sections right now to advance as we go through. So we'll find out which ones are looking at the higher level, at the tier 1 level, start to screen them down as we move forward. Alrighty. And so, yes, one question?
Find an official list for drawing of segments, and when are you going to have available a formal list of criteria, the weighting values, and the actual thing that we're going to use that you can actually comment on?
The segments are already up on the light. All those, that map shows all those segments. Those are the ones we're looking at. If we get some new ones, we will show the map will show the new alignment as we went through. The criteria, we will be posting the criteria as we go through. It will be listed up there as we start hearing the comments. We'll put the criteria on the website. And so we'd like to thank you, all the people online, and also for you that came out. This was a very sunny day. And you spent the first day of the summer sitting in a room or sitting at a screen. So we appreciate you coming out and providing your input. And thank you very much.